Hi guys, welcome to the channel and thank you for choosing Adventures in Historyland today. This is the disembodied voice of Lando talking. Just to remind you that before we get things started, that you can support this channel on Ko-fi. If you like what you see, drop a tip in the jar so I can continue editing videos with coffee. Okay guys, enjoy the video. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Adventures in Historyland YouTube channel. I am your host, Lando, or, as those of you who know me personally, my actual name is Josh, but thanks to the weirdness of the internet, I have a nickname now. Today, we are joined by the hosts of the It's a Continent podcast, Ginny and Astrid, and we are today going to talk about their journey, creating the podcast, getting their book, and some of your high and low points, and some good history chat and banter, because that's what we do here. It's wonderful to have you on the show, guys.
Thank you for having us. Yeah, this is like our first time back on the kind of podcasting mic this year. So yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, got woken us out from our slumber. So
yeah.
I do not have that reputation at all. I do not motivate people to do stuff. So that is very weird.
You're hitting 2023 strong though. So yeah, that's how you should see it.
Very much so. Okay, starting off well. So to kick things off, you, I believe, started before everybody got locked away in 2020, I think it was, because I think the first episodes were in March or something of 2020.
Yeah.
Yes.
March. Yeah.
And then after about 2 episodes or something, you said you had to do recordings from indoors. So what's it like? I mean, first of all, where did the idea come from, I guess? And then just how did it take shape? Because you had this massive world event occur right as you kick off. What was that like?
Yeah, so I can take kind of where the idea came from.
Yeah.
So I was going to say like all good ideas, they come from a date. No. No, but this one definitely did. So I went, it was a date, and we went to the Victoria and Albert Museum, and it was looking at Africans through art. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much I just didn't know about our representation in our history. And then that night, I went to Chinese just to kind of share about the date. Was there going to be another one? And then actually the point that I took away way more than a date was around just learning more about African history. So I'm Congolese and Chinese Nigerian. So that sort of led, actually it was more driven by Chini, to how I kind of be like, right, what do we do about
this? Got the laptop out, went into mission mode. What can we do? And Astrid and I love a documentary. We love probably seen all of Louis Theroux's stuff. So we said, you know what, let's go down Wikipedia wormholes. Let's explore. Let's look at our history. And, you know, as a Nigerian, why don't I know much about Congolese history, for instance, and vice versa. And even as a Nigerian, I didn't really know that much about Nigerian history, if I'm honest. So it was really around plugging these gaps and being really curious, and why weren't we taught these things in school, particularly with the sort of extent to which Britain has its history on the continent. It's quite surprising that it's not really sort of mentioned as widely, but, you know, we are seeing some things change.
Yes, and I do think that podcasts like yourself and books like your book help with that immensely, and I agree entirely. I go down rabbit holes all the time in history that I have no right to be going down because I'm supposed to be doing other stuff, and that includes very sort of intense deep dives into random stuff like the history of Benin. One time recently, one of the kings of Ethiopia and this is just specifically on topic for African history, because there are many other things that I mess around with. But and just from those little snippets, I've had the same thought, to be honest. You know, there are libraries worth of books in these subjects in each nation, that have not been written or are not available, or are sort of in either different languages or just nobody cares about it. And that's why I really wanted to talk to you guys, because, you know, I came across your podcast. First of all, great name, very nice.
There were several like iterations of that.
What were the other choices? Because this is a strong one. You landed on a strong one.
Yeah, I don't even know how.
I think we were trying to think around, you know, the where are you really from kind of angle.
That was kind of close. Yeah,
but I think we settled on it's a continent, because I mean, how often do we hear Africa referred to within the context of a country, you know? And that was kind of the whole point, was to kind of start going against that whole myth that Africa is one entity and actually has a lot going on within the continent.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is one of the running themes of It's a Continent podcast. I mean, there are some great kind of running themes through the podcast, guys, that I really enjoy. You know, the what is it? Colonizer bingo. That's fun.
Yeah.
You know, and there's the playbook, and it's always not funny, but like, it's almost a running gag how unbelievable you find some of the just repeating moral crimes that run through the history of Europeans in Africa. But more importantly than that, well, first of all, let's just follow that thought for a second. What are some of your favorite parts of doing the podcast on the whole, like through its entire run? Was it 5-6 seasons now?
Yeah, we're
season 6 now. Yeah, halfway through 6. Yeah.
Excellent. So what has been some of your highlights of it then?
Gosh, do you want to go first?
Oh, I don't know. I was trying to think.
I can go. So for me, it's like, I think just how much I get to learn, like this space that we've created that allows me the space and time to learn. When I know we've got a season coming up, you organize yourself to be able to say, okay, this is my time to learn about history and just what's going on. And I think sometimes it creates a discipline, and it's something that I have a passion for, but it creates that discipline, and that's what I love. And I get to just chat with Chidi. I don't do that enough, but we just get to be able to share that, and you completely forget. And I know it sounds super, like, everyone says this, but you so forget that you're talking to other people and other people are listening. Like, it just feels like a discussion, and it's basically like Chini and I, how we are when we watch a documentary. We're making commentary on it. Obviously, we've not done the research, but like, do you see what I mean? But in this part, we've done the research, and because we don't research topics together, so you get the other person's reaction to what you've discovered, and we then ourselves kind of end up on a tangent and start connecting dots. And so for me, it's really having that time protected to be like, this is my time to do something that I'm passionate about, and I feel like is a gap in myself. So
no, I would agree. And I think it's around the excitement of wanting to share what you've like found out with everyone, and with Astrid, just having the discussion. And then you're thinking, oh, you know, people are going to hear about this and, you know, change the way that they perceive the continent, which is great to know that we're kind of changing the way people are seeing the continent, shifting narratives. seeing the podcast material appearing in schools has been really encouraging, because it just kind of shows how, you know, I can't imagine that sort of thing happening when I was in school and a teacher would be sharing this kind of views. So
I know, like, it's so the screenshots we get when a teacher's just like, yeah, for my students' homework, they're gonna listen to this episode of your podcast. And I'm like, wow, imagine the days that I would be on someone's like lesson plan.
Yeah, I never thought when I was sat there in Year 9 history that I'd also
like one day I will be in your lesson plan, don't worry.
Yeah.
And now you're part of it. Yeah. There should be a t-shirt. There should be a t-shirt. One day I'll be in your lesson plan.
Yes. Love it.
That's a good idea.
Run with that. But no, I get that too. It does feel like when you commit to sort of like a series or a longer sort of stretch of content, rather than sort of what I tend to do, which is single subjects, that it becomes a very kind of, it's just as if you're talking to someone else. I mean, right now it just feels like it's us three talking about stuff. I mean, it's as if there's
that's
no
how
one,
it is.
it's as if there's no one else there.
Yeah.
But no, absolutely true. And you know, one of the things that I like about the show in itself is that it's fun. You treat it lightly and seriously at the same time. You talk about, you know, some pretty dark stuff in history that we all have to sort of figure out how to present, but you do it with you can still end it with a shared laugh of understanding or just disbelief. I'm a big fan of global history. You talk about some amazing figures in the podcast, people who are important in that global sense, you know, who can represent an idea or a thought or a movement outside of their own countries. Now, the majority of people only really know about Nelson Mandela. But you talk about some really amazing people that, again, because my head is stuck much further back in the timeline, I don't really know about. But what are some of, you know, the favorites? Who are some of the top favorites that you've encountered and enjoyed sharing stories about?
Yeah, to use the sort of South Africa example, we decided that we wouldn't cover Nelson Mandela just because he's, you know, the sort of the only sort of political figure that people tend to know. With Steve Biko, we chose him because, you know, what he did within the Black consciousness movement was incredible. And actually, I myself hadn't heard of Steve Biko until I was about 20, 21, to be honest. You know, which is remarkable considering, you know, I would say I had a decent amount of history being taught to me at GCSEs, etc. in the UK. So yeah, we wanted to highlight his story and actually highlight the extent to the police brutality which took place within South Africa at the time. It was a really horrific story, but it just kind of goes to show the extent to which that sort of, particularly, you know, the apartheid government was doing in South Africa at the time. And, you know, when people say, oh, apartheid ended in 1994, you know, that's within my lifetime. And it's just really shocking to think that that sort of thing was happening in the 90s, to be honest. So, yeah, that's just one of the figures that we've covered. We do also aim to have a strong representation of African women as well.
Yep. I noticed that.
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'm always like, if there's any opportunity to make sure that there was a woman within that story, we're bringing. We're highlighting it. We're liking it. Yes. I just think it's so important, and one of my all-time favorites. It was definitely covering Kenya and Wangari Maathai. Like, it was incredible, and having that environmentalism lens through it as well, because I think sometimes there's this notion of misconception around African when it comes to kind of climate change and environmentalism. So it was really important to kind of be able to really highlight her and everything that she contributed. So for me, definitely being able to share and represent more African women through history has been an amazing opportunity. And it's lots of learning, and I think that's the amazing thing about it, is that we get to learn alongside our listeners. And when someone's like, I don't really have the time to research this, do you guys, this is the topic I'm interested in, do you guys mind doing a like covering this? We'll go out, we'll do the research, and we'll cover it. And I think we've always kind of positioned ourselves as the starting point for someone who's looking to just figure out, like, I want to learn more and I don't know where to begin. We're that place.
Absolutely, and that is one of my favorite episodes, actually. But that is absolutely one of my goals as well, is to try and sort of be a starting place for people, and to I don't know, and exactly the same thing. If somebody brings me something, I feel like, I should try and find the answers for them as much as I can and help them out. So I love that. I love that you do that. So let's go from the podcast to the book, right? Because, as I said at the beginning, I feel like It's a Continent is one of the success stories out of the sort of the podcasting boom of the lockdowns. And so when did you start? So did you actually think, did you start out wanting to write a book, or was it just the podcast?
We did, even the idea of a podcast was just sort of like, right, we want to learn what's the best way for us to also be able to share that with other people, mainly our friends and family, and just do that. So it just sounds like that it all comes together really nicely, but it was just really loads of random events that just happened and somehow seemed to work. And then we were like, okay, how many seasons will we do? We'll just do one, and we'll just like do 8 episodes, and then we've just kind of
see
rolled
where
with
it
really.
takes us. The traction has really been, it just kind of shows that there's an appetite for this kind of knowledge. And it was definitely not on our cards at all. We got contacted out of the blue, to be quite honest.
Oh, excellent.
So we had no initial plans of even getting to writing a book at all. We didn't foresee it when we set out to do this podcast.
Well, I mean, I feel that in my heart a lot. I pretty much put down everything I have done up to this point as to luck. The books I've written, I didn't look for them, really. But no, okay. So why don't tell me the author's story? Like, pretend this is an actual talk show. So, like, the day that the email dropped, basically. Would you like to write a book? Was that what it was like? How did it happen?
Essentially, it was actually a Facebook message, of which I don't really use Messenger, so I was quite surprised to see something was there in the inbox. I'd posted on there was a sort of a journalism group where I was looking for guests for the show and thinking, okay, let's just sort of advertise the podcast and see if there's anybody who perhaps is a journalist within this area and has a story and wants to share with us. And then got some comments, likes, etc. It was like, oh, I'm a fan of the show. It's like, oh, that's nice, someone has heard of us. And then the following day, really, we then got a message from an commissioning editor even. And she just said, be interested in turning It's a Continent into a book. I said to Astrid, we just got this message. We're not really sure what she means at first in our minds.
Is it a scam?
I just remember just being like, might as well just talk to her. Like,
let's just talk to her and find out more information, because I think we were just like, what kind of book? I don't even think we saw this sort of crossover from the podcast straight into the book. We didn't really understand how it would translate into a book.
And we hadn't even done a year. We were still like,
no. It was November 2020, I think. So it was actually quite soon after we sort of went live.
So we were like, let's just talk.
Had a conversation, and we then sort of pulled together the sort of I don't really want to call it an application, like a pitch
Like a
type
proposal.
thing.
Yeah,
Like a
it's
Proposal.
pitch proposal. Yeah.
Yeah, like a pitch proposal about what we can do, how we can sort of get these ideas to life. And yeah, we ended up sort of making sure that when we did cover the country, we had an equal distribution of profiles, male profiles, female profiles, as well as really going beyond what we would typically sort of have seen in a country or have heard of when you associate it with a country.
Mhm.
But then it's quite difficult to sort of narrow a country down to sort of one story. So of
Yeah.
course it's not sort of representative, but it was one that we thought might sort of pique people's interests whilst reading it. And I guess the style that we've chosen as well was quite different. So we didn't want it to be academic-y or textbooky. So we kind of have also kept
You want people to read this.
Yes. I guess the sort of people that would listen to our podcast would probably want to read the book as well. So yeah, we kind of kept it a bit light. So the tone is quite similar. But of course we are it's more of a collection of short stories, much like our podcast is. We're not, our podcast episodes are not really that long. So kind of keeping in theme with that. And yeah, just making African history accessible and more accessible to all.
Which I absolutely love. And like world history sections in bookstores are never big enough for me. Because for some reason British history tends to bore me unless it's like unless it's somewhere else. But yeah, so what would you say, was there a big difference between, say, preparing material for an episode as opposed to preparing material for a chapter?
I think they followed pretty similar processes in terms of just like, the level of research you do, that sort of thing. I think with the book, we had to be slightly more careful in terms of how we've written things. We can be a bit more free flowing with the podcast in terms of like our opinions and things like that. So we had to kind of watch that a little bit with the book. But no, I think like the process itself was pretty similar. I think the challenge was very much balancing also doing the podcast and writing the book at the same time. That was that was really the biggest challenge. And we wanted to make sure that within the book it wasn't just a complete copy and paste of what we'd done in the podcast. We really,
that must have been a temptation.
It would have been so much easier. But
I don't know why we wanted to make life difficult, but it was to be honest, I'm really glad we pushed through and did that, because there are so many, and we don't kind of cross some stories we haven't even shared in the podcast, so we've done something completely different. So it's nice that people, if you've listened to the podcast, you get to explore even more, as Chinny said, very much kind of like short stories and moments in history of the same country, but in another kind of different context and stuff. I think with the book we also try to cover a lot more pre-colonials.
Yes, a good mix of
activity as well.
history.
Yes. Because I often think that African history is very much the majority of the stuff you hear about is mid 19th century, is essentially where the history books that get published live. And there's much more before European colonialism sort of takes hold, and there is a lot after, and these two edges don't get a lot of press for the most part, unless it's sort of specialist or something like that. And I was going to put in my own requests for more pre-colonial stuff. Because like I say, I like the earlier stuff. I don't know why, it's just how I'm built. But what's the reception been like to both the podcast and the book? How have people reacted? And I know you did a book tour. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, it's been really good. I think even just like when we started out the podcast, honestly, like the comments people make, and just when you find out where people are listening from, how they discovered the book. You know, Shini said earlier, you have teachers, you get students, if it's like supporting them with any work they're doing, you just get someone who's stumbled upon us and is, you know, excited just to learn more, or they've put in a request and, you know, they see that we've like delivered on it. And yeah, honestly, the way people find us always amazes me. And I also love the long paragraph emails people send on through the website, and just being like, I listened to this is what I thought, this was really good. So honestly, it's just so nice to have built a really good community through the podcast. And yeah, it was nice through the book also to be able to just meet people and yeah, have really interesting conversations. So it's, yeah, we honestly, every time Tini honestly sends me so many screenshots of comments. So it's really good.
Yeah, no, it's really nice. We've built like such a nice community, and we kind of, in a sense, are now to the point where we're kind of almost crowdsourcing our topics. You know, we never run out of topics. We always make a call out, and we always get suggestions. You know, people inboxing us. It's really interesting. It's good to see that there is an appetite for wanting to find out more about the continent. So yeah, no,
yes,
it's been great.
Absolutely. And that brings me to ask, you know, what is your current sort of obsession? Doesn't have to be necessarily connected to the podcast. And what's happening next, if you can tell anything about what's happening next or give hints?
I think my current obsession is, I think it was season 5, we started to do themes a lot more. So we're still kind of focusing, so each episode we focus on a particular country in a particular moment in time, but we started to discuss more kind of bigger themes. So we've discussed kind of the environment and how African nations, we've had guest speakers in, which I honestly love doing, and to just better understand the situation, how African nations dealing when it comes to kind of global warming, kind of current conditions and things. We covered we covered oil, which was really interesting. We also had a Togolese activist on the podcast as well. So for me, it's the themes is what for me is kind of like really gets me excited. And I think we've got some really interesting themes coming up, kind of finishing up season 6. But I think exploring that this year even more so is what I'm really looking forward to, because yeah, there are some big topics out there that we just like to get some speakers in and just have really interesting discussions about. So yeah, for me, that's my area.
Excellent.
Yeah. No,
Jenny?
definitely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the other topics. We always have a sort of page where we talk about what topics we're going to cover. We've been filling that in quite nicely. So we're finally heading back to the studio after 2 years of recording at home. So
yeah,
that's my idea, ladies and gentlemen. Remember back to the beginning. That's I got them back in there.
Yeah, yeah.
Getting us back in.
Got back in there. So yeah, really looking forward to recording in person again, which is weird because I don't think we've done that for quite some time.
We never look at each other. We don't
even have video when we record.
We just it's just
a phone call.
Just a phone call.
So yeah.
Sometimes I wish I could do that.
Yeah.
Well, so it's really, really nice that you've had such a great response to the podcast. I'm really happy for you, because the internet is a rough place when you dare to sort of come onto it and try and share your enthusiasm for stuff. It has a tendency to beat you down for trying.
But I think like Chine has a really good way of saying sometimes you just have to not go into a deeper layer, you know.
No, I don't.
You've got to also think about protecting yourself, and I think that's something that we've been really clear on, is like we understand why we do this, and like we're also kind of open to people feedback, and you know we've made certain changes and stuff, but I think sometimes when it just gets a little bit, dark. Yeah, you just avoid.
No,
So I think there's
surely
an
not.
element of that.
Surely not.
Yeah.
Yeah, apparently it does. So yeah, also protecting ourselves in that sense has been really important, and just
I'm appalled at the internet and new for. I am appalled daily by the internet, and apart from it, and also I've suddenly realized that I, for some reason, have appeared on this show looking as if looking very podcasty. Actually, I'm wearing a baseball cap. I don't usually do this. This is because I was a little late getting to the recording, and I just sat down and I turned on the screen. I still have the hat on. I'm not deliberately trying to be, because I don't have the headphones, right? I don't have the big headphones or anything. That's my proof. But I'm not actually trying to be like Mr. Internet here. But I'm very glad that you take care of interactions with the audience so well. I mean, I haven't noticed. I think one of the testimonies to how well and how good the stuff you do is that you don't see a lot of drama swirling around you on social media feeds. Behind the scenes, maybe it's different. I don't know, but you have a very positive, educational, and well thought out content creation system, I think. And
I like how you call it a system. It sounds so like it does come together. It just happens to come together. But I do think we're not kind of drama type people, so we wouldn't kind of get involved in that anyway. But I think it just goes back to us really making sure that we built a really nice community and just maintaining that, and getting feedback where we can, and making changes. But it's also making sure that we're clear on the reason why we do it. I think it's always been for us, and as long as we enjoying what we're doing and people are also enjoying it, it'll continue.
Absolutely, and I hope it continues for a very long time, or as long as you can sustain doing it. Because it's hard work producing these things.
It is. Yeah. Anyone for just doing it by yourself, and it is a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Who does the editing?
Ginny.
Yeah.
Ginny.
I don't think she could. To be honest, I don't think she could trust me with doing the editing. To be honest, I feel like she'd listen to it, just be like, "Oh, I heard some breaths there." No.
Yeah, no, very. If I hear a breath,
If she hears, I feel like I would rather just let me not get involved. I have offered sometimes. I just thought, what, she'd rather do this herself. I don't think she would. Do that. Not that I wouldn't be good. I could learn, but I just feel like